Hi, I'm your Gemini friend. This video is going to be about Chiron in Capricorn or Chiron in the 10th house. And I do have more information on Chiron in a video in the description where I just go more into the energy and the overall meaning of what it represents within our charts. But for this one, it has a unique relationship with Chiron itself, since Chiron is so much about the space between Saturn and Uranus and kind of what goes on there to help us integrate our more material experience with our more ethereal and purposeful meaning. So with Capricorn in the 10th house being associated with Saturn, this is very much about the material journey and the way that you learn and grow through that. But if you have Chiron in Capricorn or you have it in the 10th house, either or both, the difference is going to be with Chiron in Capricorn, Chiron's expression is going to be like embodying Capricorn energy through the personality of Capricorn, while Chiron in the 10th house is more the area of life that deals with our ambitions, our career, our professional life, the way that we're seen publicly in our public image. Because the 10th house starts with one of the angles, the midheaven, and the midheaven is our public persona, the way that we're seen, our legacy, and our overall professional image. So this can be a very public and prominent Chiron placement. It actually often indicates public vulnerability and public healing and healing through the career. But I'll get into all of this within the video. And if you are interested, I do offer personal natal chart readings and synastry readings with information in the description. But okay, let's get into this. So keywords with Chiron in Capricorn and 10th house energy. So key ideas with this placement are going to be patience, balance, and your relationship with control. Because this is very representative of feeling a sort of crisis in our purpose on a material level with what we can actually create material on earth through our ambitions, through our physical efforts, through discipline. Because the planet backing Capricorn in the 10th house is Saturn, and Saturn takes its time. Saturn requires patience, and Saturn is very directly connected to the idea of discipline, of recognizing where we put our energy and the results that we get from that. Discipline is really very simple. It is truly about the outlets that we choose to funnel our energy into and kind of how well we are able to concentrate that. I say it's simple, but it's definitely not easy. Though what can come with this placement is such a strong understanding of this concept that the balance is not there. There's more effort and energy put into work and ambition and achievement than there is into what really makes life purposeful and worth living. Our connections, our feelings. There can be a strong desire to kind of sacrifice the humanity for the sake of achievement. And that's not to say that the pursuit of your goals is wrong. It's actually very strongly tied to your purpose in life. But with Chiron, it's a wound that we experience in order to help other people heal from it. But what Chiron represents is a wound that we suffer from in order to better understand the effect that we can have on other people, learn that empathy, and create purpose and healing out of that suffering. But it can feel with this placement that there's a lot of weight, a lot of heaviness on the idea of your public achievement, of what you can have to show for who you are in the world and what you've been working on, which obviously this is like the concept of career, but it doesn't have to be a traditional career at all. And your own individual energies within your natal chart are going to tell you so much more about your purpose and your ambition, about your values and your goals and your relationship with other people and yourself. But the expectations of other people can be so heavy here because this can really speak to a warped relationship with the idea of authority. And it's a really interesting one to me because authority, we give people authority. We have bosses, and that seems like a position of authority that can't really be questioned. But it is important to examine your relationship with everyone who's ever seemed like a boss, felt like a boss, or anyone that you've given that authority to. Because with the sense of capability and responsibility that comes with Capricorn and 10th house energy, the expectations of those that we give authority can be like the most important thing. thing, but it's very important to recognize your relationship with giving authority, because you can give yourself just as much as authority as you give other people in your lives. But traditionally, in the way that Pluto has been in Capricorn for all of this time, and now it's shifting into Aquarius, we are seeing so many changes within traditional work and the ambitions and goals that people are having. It's becoming much more personal and purposeful, but there's still a lot of lingering Capricorn influence, Saturn influence, and it's something that truly needs lots of balance, because Saturn is essential. Learning how to master our material realm and our relationship with what we can do is very important to being a person. That's essentially the first step of Chiron, to really go through your Saturn lesson. And the Saturn return with this placement is incredibly important. So really analyzing your Saturn placement, what it means to you, the struggles that you've had so far, the forced patience, the extra effort that you have to put into that area, that can be very enlightening as far as what really is meaningful for you in your soul in this lifetime. Another thing you can do is look at the part of fortune within your chart and interpret that, because that can be also very enlightening when it comes to where your fortune lies. And it's also important to look at the houses that are associated with earth energy, the 2nd, the 6th, and the 10th. Because the 2nd is, like I mentioned, our values. And that can really help us with a sense of direction in knowing what is truly personally valuable to us, what we consider to be of the most worth. Well, the 6th house is more about our process in getting there, the way that we do the work itself. So look at the signs on the cusp of those houses for you and any planets that you might have there for extra insight into this, because the 10th house is the values and the process, creating mastery out of that. But too much focus within this energy can create a really single-minded way of seeing things. And another way to balance Capricorn and 10th house energy is with the opposite sign and house, Cancer, in the 4th, where we're focused more on our home and our comfort and our roots and our link to our family, to our sanctuary, our feeling of having some place to feel safe and to recharge. That recharging is super important here, because this can speak to having a really difficult time in balancing the effort that you put forth, the work that you do, and then actually allowing yourself to rest and recharge. It can feel like that's not an option. It can feel like it's shameful. There's guilt when trying to rest, because this focus on constant productivity feels so crucial. It feels like a core part of you to need to always be working, to be achieving. But consider your relationship with this idea and what it truly says about you, and your idea of like what you're worth without your productivity. Who are you without your job, without your achievements? And what do you enjoy? What's meaningful to you in life? Because looking at that balance of Capricorn and Cancer and the 10 and the 4th, I can use the very traditional example of like a father who is always working for the purpose of supporting his family, but the family sees him as absent and his relationship with them suffers for that. To have a balance between the hard work and the support, because Capricorn wants to support. Capricorn rules the skeletal system. It is the backbone. So that desire is always going to be there. But to sacrifice your close relationships or those things that are also deeply important to you, you don't want to do that, because those are what create meaning in life. But it can also be very helpful to examine your own 4th house, your IC, and your childhood and your relationship with your parents, because parents or early authority figures in life really shape our relationship with authority and kind of subconsciously inform us in the future who to give authority to again. If you find like patterns with your bosses and maybe like the people that had authority over you early on in life, you might notice something, especially as far as like which people you give the most power. And healing relationships with your parents or those authority figures can also be very helpful here, and usually not easy at all. And it can also be really helpful to redefine success on your own terms. If you were taught that a certain form of achievement is the pinnacle, this is what you have to do, these expectations that have put on you, if those aren't actually true to you, then it's always going to feel like you're working for something that's like just out of reach. You can put all of the effort in the world into it, but if there isn't that meaning and purpose behind it, then it's extra painful because you know the value of hard work. You understand the very Saturn concept of take your time, take it step by step, put conscious effort into it, and you will have a superior result. But you don't want to put all that effort into something and then later realize that it wasn't actually what you wanted to be working for in the first place. But this sort of lesson can be very tied to having Chiron here. But that link that Chiron does between Saturn and Uranus, looking at what Uranus represents, this is collective energy, it's community, it's greater purpose, and our dreams on a higher scale, our dreams for society, our dreams of progress. To have Chiron in your 10th house or in Capricorn, it does show a link between these energies, an understanding of that Uranus electricity that through the lens of Saturn is very, very hard to control because it's not meant to be controlled. Saturn wants to control, but in a healthy way. The goal of the planet is to help us learn not just what we can do materially, not just what we can do to the material world, but also our limitations. And this is so directly tied to Chiron as well, because Chiron himself, the character of Chiron, was immortal, but he was wounded and he had to suffer from this wound that, anyone else would have died from, but he's immortal. But this understanding of pain created more empathy than he would have had without that, which is why he was such a good healer and able to connect with people and to ultimately sacrifice himself, because he had that empathy and that connection to other people. Chiron is about teaching through experience, and your experience with life thus far, and especially within your career, look at what has been the most painful. And then, of course, work on healing it, work on integrating this into who you are as a person, not rejecting it, accepting that what has happened, understanding the limits of Saturn. Saturn is time, Saturn is mortality, our awareness of our mortality, and the desire to do something with our lives before we die, which can really exacerbate those feelings of I need to achieve, I need to make a name for myself. But understanding that time is not the enemy. While time is limited, we have enough of it, but it can feel like a race, and it can feel like you're moving too slowly. But like I said, patience is very key here, because Saturn wants us to learn patience. That's why the house that we have it in, we experience things more slowly than other people might, because we're meant to learn this lesson. We're meant to have to struggle so that we can truly understand the significance of it. If it wasn't hard, it wouldn't mean as much, because people don't tend to value things that come to them easily. Saturn teaches us value. It teaches us what's worth putting hard work into. But your relationship with this concept, until you get really right within yourself on making sure that what you're working for is meaningful to you, not just like technically, not just in your mind, but in your heart as well. It needs to feel important. And one thing that can come with feelings and such a publicly visible placement is that sense of public vulnerability being very necessary, because you're the sort of person who is very exemplary. You're somebody who people can look up to, and they see your understanding and potential mastery over the material world as something that is very admirable. This is something that society really looks up to, which again adds to the heaviness. The weight of your influence can feel so heavy because you always want to appear capable and responsible and like you're somebody who can be relied on. But to be made an example of humanity, it can feel painful and difficult and unfair that you have to do it, but somebody with less of less weight on their name, somebody less respected wouldn't have the same effect as you do as an example. And when I'm speaking of being an example, I mean showing your humanity to people on a large scale, or through your career, through your public efforts. You need that human side of you seen. You need what the wound is representing to be something that is fueling you in a healthy way. This can manifest in so many different ways, but the best example that I can think of is, say, someone who has a lot of authority, like a boss. Say you are the boss. You can be the very cold, intimidating, domineering type of boss that people are afraid to go to, but they get the work done because they're afraid. Or you could be the sort of boss who doesn't shy away from letting their humanity be known, maybe through failures. Failures are not a bad thing, and failure should not be seen as a negative. Failure is just a failed attempt, and you can always make more attempts. Failure is proof that you tried. And achievement shouldn't always be the goal even necessarily, because what if that achievement isn't even right for you? What if it's not meant to be? What if it's actually better that you fail because it aligns you with a path that's better for you? Trying to really force things when they're not working is always a chance to re-examine the entire thing. And being somebody who is comfortable with their failures, with showing the more vulnerable parts of themselves, is so much better as a leader and as an example for other people, because it frees them to feel like they're allowed to be human. And I mean, just another example, think of how people are going to handle their own mistakes and failures around you if you have that rigid mindset, or you're exuding that intimidating persona. They're going to be more likely to hide those things. And it's better, if you're a boss with employees, you want to form an actual relationship with them. You want them to feel comfortable enough to tell you if something goes wrong, or it's more likely that they'll hide it. This is a weird example, and of course this is not going to be the same situation for everybody. You don't have to be a boss with employees. It can happen in so many different ways, but this is the best example that I can think of why it's important to be vulnerable on some level when it comes to being in the public eye. Because when people have such high expectations for you, how stressful is that to never ever be allowed to make a mistake? I'm not saying publicly broadcast every single one of your mistakes and make yourself seem like somebody incapable, but you're just not likely to do that anyway. It's more about letting other people see that it's okay to have pain, to have setback, to experience their human side, to have feelings. Because truly, this can come with not even allowing yourself to show feelings, especially in a public way or at work, which, I mean, it's professional to not be overly emotional at work. But at the same time, we are all humans. We are all working together for something. So there needs to be humanity there. There needs to be connection, and there needs to be purpose behind what you're working towards, so you don't feel neglected, so the people around you don't feel neglected. Nobody only wants to work. Everybody has things that they enjoy, hobbies, and just the things that they like doing. Self-care, take care of yourself, do the things that you want to do the things that you enjoy, and create a life that is not only achievement focused, but also one that you're enjoying. Because the traditional forms of success, or what you might have been taught to do, aren't going to stay that way. Just think now of the way that our values change as a society, and again, consider how Pluto is in Capricorn for the last time for a really long time. And we're all going to be processing things in a more Aquarius way, with our own uniqueness being at the forefront, with what we can contribute to society from a more creative, pioneering, and inventive standpoint. To stick to that rigid traditionalism is just not going to work. The sign of Capricorn, the energy of Saturn, this all exists for a purpose, and there's nothing wrong with it, but we still do need to evolve as people. So sticking to traditions that might have stuck around for a long time, but you can see them fading out, it's better to go with the flow, because Chiron bridges the gap between rigid Saturn and electric flowing Uranus. And the worst thing that you can do when faced with Uranus Aquarius energy is resist it. Flexibility is very important here, because the stronger you try to hold something tight and control it, the bigger the explosion will be when it backfires. And the more you just allow that flow and allow that humanity, the more comfortable you feel within yourself, the less difficult it is to handle any mistakes that you might make. People aren't going to have completely unrealistic expectations from you, and we're more able to coexist as a system, and you, with this visibility, are more able to attract the people that resonate with your energy that you're going to be able to heal. And sometimes that healing is the purpose. Healing people can be so many different things, because one example can even be publicly sharing your story and then having people connect with it and learn so much about themselves just from hearing your story. This is how to handle the pain in a Chiron way. And it is so important with this placement as well to listen to feedback, because there is that potential for like tunnel vision, and the phrase "no man is an island" comes to mind. No matter what we do, we're always going to live in a society. We are all intrinsically linked, and that can't be helped, but it can be embraced. And I don't really see this as the sort of placement that would encourage or even allow like living off the grid all by yourself. This is very much linked to how you're seen publicly and the public overall. Though, I mean, you know your chart better than me, you do you, but I see this placement as meant to be an example and meant to really take back the idea of authority and give it to yourself. And you know, I've been saying this whole time that you are so good at these things, but this can also come with a very strong feeling of inadequacy, of feeling like you're doing things too slowly, like your achievement is too slow, like you're not at the level that you are expecting yourself to be at, maybe even feeling behind your peers. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. You have your own timing. Every single person has their own very specific timing. And I would look to Saturn to that the most, but of course there are so many other things within our chart that can show what we're going to struggle with, what we're going to need to focus on. So comparing yourself to other people, do not do that. Just don't. It's pointless. You can look back at your past self and see how far you've come. You can celebrate your wins. You can really focus on the achievement that you have done so far and then admire how far you've come, like I'm saying. But don't ever compare yourself to another person, because they're not you, they're not living your path, they probably don't even have your Chiron placement. And if they do, still not something to compare. Comparison does absolutely nothing, even if you're looking at it as a form of like motivation. You can be inspired by people, you can look up to people, but don't compare your success to theirs, because no matter how similar you are, you don't know their life, you don't know their perspective. And recognizing your own very specific perspective and what you have been through as your own and yours alone, and even sharing that, can be very helpful, because you're sort of meant to embody this idea, the idea that like what we've been through shapes us, and how we handle it, that's what we have control over. So by being an example of somebody who has worked through hardship and has learned how to create more meaning out of that and have a nice work-rest balance your achievements with your relationships, and ultimately recognize that some things just can't be controlled. We can't control everything. No matter how much effort you might put into something, that doesn't even guarantee that it will be satisfying. That flexibility and self-forgiveness are really key ways to heal this. I mean, if you can embrace your flaws and your mistakes so much that you're not ashamed of them, you will openly share them. That only shows strength. It shows that you're not ashamed of what you've had to do in order to get to where you are. And a sense of shame of expecting more of yourself, or of having standards that are just unnecessarily high, those are never going to help you. They're not there. Even if it seems motivating on a surface level, it's ultimately beating yourself up in order to try to grow, which is holding you back. So recognize all the places where you might have resistance, or you're trying to control it. And recognize any like projected expectations from other people that you might be unconsciously trying to live up to. Drop all of that. You're likely the sort of person who, even if you completely stopped everything and started over, you would be able to build so much out of what other people might not even see as useful. The resourcefulness of this placement is incredible, but it needs to be used to build you up rather than to push you down. Any perfectionistic or like self-punishing behaviors, those need to be looked at and healed. And the connection with people, emotional connections with other people, you can put all of your effort into something, but if you don't have the support of those around you, or you aren't connecting to them. That connection is what makes things truly meaningful. Because like, why build a giant tower all for yourself? Like, are people going to appreciate it if they're not allowed in? I'm just making stuff up. I'm gonna stop it here because I think I'm just repeating myself. But this is a very heavy energy, and it's not an easy one by any means. But the more comfortable you can get with yourself and like just share it very openly. Connect with people who are like-minded, and connect to those people who are going to understand what you've been through, what you've been working on, and who are going to be like an outlet for you to vent your frustrations, supportive energy for you. Forming those connections is so incredibly healing because you are meant to be healing them as well. You might not even recognize the influence that you have, but others can see it, and they're likely giving you a lot more credit than you are. So I hope that this is useful. Please feel free to share your experiences with me. I always want to know. And thank you so much for watching. I really, 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 really appreciate it. Seriously, thank you. I love you. Bye.